YouTube, what's going on? We're back with some more of the First Descendant. We got Freyna out again. We're rocking her Contagion build. So in this video here, I got another, it's another verse video. I got the Contagion Amplification versus the Contagion Crit build. So I go over the crit build in this video for the Contagion in full detail, and then we square it off running a Supermassive Receptor against the Contagion Amplification build. Go over my full thoughts. Everything's time-stamped in there. You guys let me know how you feel about it in the comments. I'd be interested to hear what you guys have to say about it. And as always, please feel free to turn on those notifications, sub to the channel, drop a like. Alright, this is my Freyna Contagion Crit build. I have this going head-to-head in a showcase versus the Amplification build, just so you can see the difference between the crit and the non-crit builds. Again, when it comes to the, I'm just going to go over it with the critical hit rate. This is why it's important to have the Ancestor module. While our damage is, really nice at a, 5.436 times the on a multiplier, the skill critical hit rate is less to be desired. It's at, below 30%. When you talk about some crit, descendants like Bunny, you can, that are able to take advantage of, passive traits within the weapon. They can get their critical hit rate upwards, or close to, at least on my build, 50%, which is, I feel like it's got to be at least somewhere close to 50% on the critical hit rate to make the build slap and hit as much as it's needed. So keep that in mind when you're when using a crit build. You have to use the 4 critical hit modules that that take up the slots: Frontlines, Emergency Measure, Skill, Insight, and Concentration. We'll go over it in detail. It's not enough. There isn't a weapon that's going to get you the critical hit rate that you need. And then even with the module, it needs to be in red. You need to have an insane amount of critical hit rate for the build to, I feel, do and tick crit damage at a consistent rate. At the 27%, so right up front at the 27%, it's just not enough critical hit rate. You need to be upwards of 40 into the 50. That in my opinion makes Freyna a non-crit descendant. So even though there's crit builds out there and they are fun to use, don't get me wrong, the difference between the amplification and the crit is night and day, and you'll see it within here. In my personal opinion, no matter how I build it out or what I put in there, and maybe we'll get some gains and we'll keep trying, obviously, it's just not enough to overtake the amplification Contagion build. One, it doesn't take as many module slots up with the crits. You're able to spec in and utilize different things within the amplification build that you just don't have the freedom to do within the crit build, because it takes up the 4 standard for the crit. Then you have your standard cooldowns, your costs, and everything else, unless you have an Ancestor to back you up and eliminate some of the pain or free up another slot to be able to put in something for additional damage. So I just want to get that out of the way real quick and up front, just so you're aware of it. Everything really boils down to your critical hit rate within here. This needs to be high, upwards of 40%. I know I keep changing the number, but this 27%, it's not enough. So just keep that in mind when you're building your builds out. You really want this to shoot through the roof, even if you have to sacrifice a little bit of the the damage multiplier on it. You really need this to uptick into the upper echelons of 40%. And some descendants, it's easy to do. Viessa, Bunny, easy enough. They can take advantage of weapons to shoot it through the roof. Freyna does not have that at least right now there is nothing that's going to proc that up or help support getting that critical hit rate. Alright, so to kick it off with the Reactor, again we want to run this with the Toxic Mechanics Reactor, taking advantage of our Toxic Skill Power and our Tech Skill Power within that Reactor. Got the dog rolls at the skill critical hit damage, skill critical hit rate in gold. We run this with our 4-piece Plague Armor set. Again, this nets us the 5% Tech Power, but more importantly, it allows us to spec into the 4-piece set, which is a 43.2% toxic skill power increase, and then on acquiring a custom resource we get an additional 21.6% bump additional on the toxic skill power. So huge on the skill. On the toxic skill power, absolutely melts enemies. And again, when you're building your weapon, just keep in mind not to spec into the firearm critical hit rate and damage, as there's, as you can see, debuffs associated with the 4-piece set. So just spec into other things other than crit damage for your weapon. You know, I recommend the Fallen Hope. We'll go over the Fallen Hope, not in full detail, but again, this weapon is, you know, really I feel like built for Freyna. When it comes to the rolls, again, on the coring, you want max HP and defense. I mean, you can do you if you want to remove the defense in for elemental resistance. I highly recommend keeping with the max HP, but again, you know, do you. When it comes to the rolls on the, or the attributes that roll on the component set, again, MP recovery, HP increases, defenses, elemental defenses are all things that you're shooting for. As again, I think the most important one to have on your sensor is the MP recovery in combat. I feel like that's huge. I think we've got it coupled with resistance, but again, the DBNO duration, don't need that. I would rather have like a fire resistance. I believe there's also an HP, increased HP that can roll within here. So there is gains that it can be had within my external components on certain things that you kind of want to spec into for your Descendant. And again, you know, do you on the rolls that you have. This is what I got. I know I can get better sets once I get them to drop. So again, as I was going over at the beginning, when it comes to the build and just the limitations of the crit build, unfortunately, again, this is a fun build. I don't want to knock it, but again, there's just certain things that really drag it down, that make it less viable. Again, than the amplification build. So I'm just going to quickly, as I'm doing this, show this. So again, this is related to my modules, to my arcade tuning and stuff. We've only got 35,000 shield. I'm not too whipped on that with the 8,000 HP. 8 HP is nice, but that defense is extremely low, very hard on the survivability personally. And again, I'm not one that likes to go in with, you know, glass cannon type builds. I like to have the survivability to be able to grind and really just wipe without taking any deaths, you know, the 0 death runs. So again, we went over the skill critical hit rate. Now you're looking at the, you know, kind of the survivability aspect of it all. And again, it's all about the freedom of being able to, you know, not have so many slots tied up. So again, I'm just going to go to the, you know, the amplification build for a second. Then as you can see, just because I'm able to free up and add survivability mods, because there isn't so many mods consumed with what's required to get the, you know, the crit build, you know, off the ground and viable, because it needs to be viable at the end of the day. You just take, you know, you just lose, you know, module slots for other things. And for me, you know, it was a survivability as well as damage, you know, as well. So again, just things to consider. As you can see, the drop in the shield, everything else will stay the same, but it's really the survivability note. I can increase my HP, I can increase my defense. It all depends on the mods that I'm using within it. I like to use the spear and shield. That's where I'm getting the defense and an additional power bump. That again, the crit build just doesn't have the you know, the slottings needed to get it there. So just keep that in mind when going through the build. Arcade tuning path, again, we want to be spec'd into as much critical hit damage and critical hit rate as possible. Unfortunately, we can't get into this particular node because we need to skip over to the mutant cell slot, the malachite one, because we need to have the defense neutralization. This is a great mod, toxic cohesion again on our other mutant cell slot, and the cooldown. So again, it's just trying to get over to here. Again, we do have some waste in the weapon critical hit damage, but there's no way around it to get to the slot. If you've got a better path, use it. This was, you know, the one that could get me to all the capstonings that I needed, again, for viability of the build. Inversion reinforcement. Again, I like my survivability node. We got a recovery for MP at the 45-second regen on the MP. This couples nice with the fellow that's also giving us MP back at every 45 seconds. So every 45 seconds, you know, whether these are offset or not, we are getting mana or MP regeneration at a set % chance, and that's at a base 16% chance with the fellow, which we'll go over. And then I run this on the skill line with my focus boost, again reducing the total amount of skill cost, so I don't have to worry about you know, losing the mana, or I can spam freely on my skills and not have to worry about it consuming all of my mana bar. And the fellow, as I went over, it automatic covers MP at a 16% rate at every 45 seconds. That's why we run it. We send a module, so I know I've been flip-flopping it back and forth for it. I will go over the amplification build. I'll just skim through it, not going to talk too much about it because this is more of the crit build and what it takes to get it off the ground. But I will just quickly show it just because it is going head-to-head with the Contagion Crit and the Contagion Amplification builds in this vid for you guys. Alright, so Infected Weapon, that's the one I like to run. Again, with the Infected Weapon, as you can see, it takes it, we're able to utilize it on all 4 of our skills, which, to me makes it the better one. Again, I want this in double golds, just haven't been able to get one to drop yet in double gold for myself. But again, when attacking with continuous damage, all of our skills inflicts the Arche infection, so you get the additional skill power, that's built into the toxic or the damage over time or the continuous damage at a 5-second duration at a damage interval of 1 second, so we get an additional 5 ticks of high level damage on our toxic. And then the exclusive weapon, we get the additional skill power when we pull out our Venom Baptism. Again, that's our exclusive weapon, so it gets an additional, again, skill power bump to that weapon when we pull it out, and we want that in gold to really take advantage of that. So this is a really nice trigger mod. So we're rocking this with the Contagion Transcendent module. Again, when enemies inflicted with room trauma is killed, the contagion of room 0 trauma surrounds it. So it's just, again, spreading around the room. As they die, they spread it to other enemies, and it just, it's just a chain effect. All of our skills carry the room trauma, and again, we run this with the, allows us to utilize the Putrid Venom when we're with Contagion. Again, defense mechanism just gives us a little bit of buff. It helps with the survivability, so just make sure you're popping this every time it runs out, just so you get the additional defense, a little bit of duration within your skill. All huge, so just remember to constantly have your defense mechanism up so that you have some additional survivability when you're running your missions. I run this with the mid-air maneuvering just to get the additional module capacity on there. I like the mid-air maneuvering. The Ancestor module, I run this with the, again, skill critical hit rate. We do have damage in blue and duration. We want these in purple or gold and even red. Again, I went over it. The skill critical hit rate for Freyna on the crit build needs to be in red. If it's not, it's just the overall critical hit rate. Even with all the modules applied, again, it's not where it needs to be. Again, you want this to be upwards of 40%. Again, our damage is solid. We need this to be upwards of 40%. I feel to make it, like, if you want to take this build out and do end game content and not have to worry about dying and just watch things melt in front of you, that's where I feel it needs to be. I mean, this is just my opinion. I mean, you can do you. I feel like even with the gold critical hit rate and with all the critical hit rates that I have within the skill build, it's not enough. The amplification beats it out, unfortunately, and it's not even close. So just being upfront with you on that, at least on everything that I'm seeing with the modules, that I have. There is another option if you wanted to put another critical hit module in there with hyper focus, but again, it's more for damage. And again, it requires you to take something else out to proc it in. So you'd be losing maybe your focus on toxic, which again, you need the skill cooldown to be low for this build, because we've got to be able to have these skills when we need them, especially because we don't have the survivability. So it's always that give and take. So there is other options out there. If you've got something better, I mean, by all means rock it. But yeah, that's the core of it there. So again, we're going to go into our 4-piece set: skill concentration, skill insight, emergency measures, and frontlines. Those are the 4 crit mods that you need to rock. And again, we need to have the cooldown, so we immediately take another 2 slots up for our skill cooldown. We've got our focus on toxic. Again, this allows us to spec into some heavy toxic power, as well as the skill cooldown. You could put focus on tech if you wanted to. We've got our skill cost standard. Again, you can run with strong mentality. I feel like it's not enough, so there is a skill power modifier decrease in this. You can run with the strong mentality. Again, if you had a better ancestor with some, skill cost in there, we might be able to, reduce this down and give us the, strong mentality, which doesn't have the skill power decrease. But unfortunately, it's not there. You can try it with the strong mentality, but I feel like you will run out of mana fairly quickly, and you do need the range. So. Again, skill expansion is there. You can go for maximize range, but again, you'd be taking double. You'd be taking a 40% skill power modifier drop. So it's really up to you. It's either you go with the skill cost to maximize your conservation, or you maximize your range, one or the other. But either way, there's a skill power modifier decrease within it. So that's pretty much, where we're left with the crit build, and does it hit? Yeah. Can it do, some of, the end game content? Yes, but it's just not as powerful, or does it carry the survivability needed, for the, the Forbidden Sanctuaries, just the higher level runs. Fallen Hope is the weapon. Again, you can see my cores on there: fire rate, firearm attack, toxic attack, fire rate, speed. I've got it rolled with multi firearm attack, multi damage, and toxic attack. Really spec'd heavily into toxic in this weapon. I mean, you can do whatever you want if you wanted to remove something else out. But again, we've got our 3 firearm attacks. We've got our rounds per magazine. These are critical to have on the build for Freyna. Just because her rounds per magazine directly benefit her 4th ability, Venom Baptism, and as well, fire rate does as well. It benefits Venom Baptism, so having fire rate up with the sharp precision shot, the fire rate up just on your normal blue mod with the rounds per magazine. Again, all those are going to benefit your 4th ability, Venom Baptism. And again, I'm heavy into the toxic. Again, you can run this with some weak point or another multi, another multi one. I got a 5% multi. You could do multi hit chance on one of these, but I went poison, priority, toxic, and then toxic circulation, just to really put the amount of toxic, just full toxic on this gun. I've been liking it. But again, there's different options you guys can do. But again, just remember to stay away from the critical hit damage. That's why we're able to use the charge amplification to really increase our firearm attack, because our reactor carries a negative debuff on rate and firearm damage, or the firearm critical hit damage. You don't really want that within your weapon. To the Fallen Hope, what really matters most, I'm not going to go into in detail, I'll go over it in full detail on my amplification build, are all of its unique abilities, and it just kind of chains into itself by just simply starting it with a toxic skill. Fire a toxic skill, one just chains into the other, and then at a certain percentage rates, you're triggering your perdition. Your explosions are triggering at a 50% rate. Perdition is triggering at a 40% rate, and then your toxic discharge and your toxic aggression are just up essentially the whole time. As soon as it comes off, you just keep firing another toxic skill, and then boom, it's back up again, and it just rinse and repeat. But as you can see, it's absolutely insane. You've got your firearm attack increase at 65%. The attribute status trigger effect rate, again, that's the toxic, it's trigger rate, so we respect into it quite heavily. And then obviously we're getting additional the attribute status effect trigger rate increase, huge. Toxic discharge, again, 15-second duration, at 5 max stacks, 19% skill power per stack. That's 95%. Just again, toxic skill power increase to the base, insanity. And then we've got our 40% trigger rate on the perdition. Again, firearm damage increases. We've got poison at max stacks. We again generate more additional firearm damage. Once this thing is humming and everything is triggering into itself, it honestly feels like you have another Venom Baptism going in the background. This weapon is so fun to use, and then again, it just passively gives you the toxic skill power too. As you're carrying it out, you know, don't even have to fire it. It's just triggering that for you, so you're able to, you know, at least generate more toxic skill power out of it without even having to take a shot. Beautiful weapon. If you're not running with Freyna, you definitely you should be running it with her. So when it comes to the amplification build, I'm not going to go over it. I've gone over my full thoughts about the two of them and why I feel the crit build with Freyna needs, you know, a lot of help with the Ancestor module, or you need to find a way to increase your critical hit rate chance to make it, you know, better than the amplification build. Again, in my opinion. Alright, this is our reactor. Getting toxic pack on the bottom. Nothing changes with our 4-piece plague. This is the Arche tuning. Our inversions. And not change versus the crit. Fellow, same deal. These are the amplification builds. Again, this is all in another vid too. And no change to the weapon. Just went over that. That's a Contagion Amplification build.